There is a photograph I took last spring that still gets me every time I look at it. On the left side of the frame, there is a patch of bare earth. It is dark, damp, and completely empty. Nothing has sprouted there yet. On the right side of the frame, maybe 3 feet away, there is a row of garlic plants so thick, so green, and so tall that they look like they belong in a different climate entirely. Same soil, same sun, same water, same gardener. The only difference is when those cloves went into the ground. One side was planted in April, the way almost every beginner does it, the way I did it for years. The other side was planted in late October, almost as an afterthought, on a cold afternoon when I honestly did not want to be outside at all. The wind was cutting right through my jacket, and my fingers were numb by the time I finished. And that October side did not just grow better. It grew like a completely different plant. The bulbs were twice the size, the stalks were thicker than my thumb, and the flavor was so intense it almost burned. That is the entire mystery of autumn garlic in one image. It is not a trick, it is not a fertilizer, and it is certainly not a new hybrid. It is simply the oldest clock in the world, and most of us have been ignoring it. Now I know exactly what you might be thinking right now. You are picturing your own garlic patch, or maybe the garlic you tried to grow once and gave up on. You planted it in spring because that is when you plant everything else. That is when the garden centers put out their little paper bags of seed garlic, right next to the tomato cages and the pepper starts. That is when the soil finally feels warm enough to work, when the sun is out, when the birds are singing, when everything in your body tells you it is time to grow. And you waited and you watered and you weeded, and what did you get? You got small bulbs. Tight, yes, but small. You got cloves that were hard to separate, with papery skins that stuck like glue. You got a harvest that was fine, technically fine, but never the kind of garlic you see hanging in braids at a farm stand or piled in wooden crates at a harvest festival. And you probably blamed yourself or your soil or the variety or the weather. You did everything the package said and it still was not right. I know that feelings. I know the specific disappointment of pulling a garlic plant in July and seeing a bulb the size of a walnut when you were expecting something the size of an apple. I gardened that way for a good 15 years before I finally understood what was actually going on. And the reason you have likely never heard the real answer is honestly kind of annoying. It works too well and costs too little for anyone to sell it to you. There is no product to buy. There is no gadget. There is no subscription. There is just a date on the calendar and a clove in the ground, and that is the whole idea. Let me take you back to a conversation that changed the way I grow food forever. I have a neighbor, Mrs. Kowalska, who has been working the same plot of land for over 30 years. Her garden is the kind of garden that makes other gardeners stop their cars and stare. Not because it is fancy, not because it is landscaped, but because everything in it is so absurdly healthy that it looks almost unfair. Her tomatoes are the size of softballs, heavy on the vine and red all the way through. Her onions come out of the ground looking like they were grown for a magazine cover. Her carrots are straight and long, the kind you see in seed catalogs and assume are photoshopped. And her garlic every single year is the size of a child's fist. Massive white papery bulbs that she braids and hangs from the rafters of her shed. The braids are so long they almost touch the floor. For years I assumed she had some secret fertilizer, some old-world trick she had brought with her from the old country, some potion made from nettles or wood ash or who knows what. I hinted, I asked, I complimented. I told her I would trade her my best tomato seeds for just one hint. She just smiled and told me to keep trying. It was honestly a little frustrating. I could see the answer was right there in her garden in her hands, and she was not giving it up. Then one October afternoon, I saw her out in the garden, kneeling on a foam pad, pushing cloves into the cold soil with her bare hands. It was drizzling. The wind was coming from the north. The trees were half bare, and the whole world looked like it was shutting down for the year. I walked over and said, partly joking, that she must have lost her mind, planting in weather like that. She looked up at me with dirt on her fingers and rain on her glasses, and said very simply that garlic needs a winter. It needs to be cold. It needs to be planted when the world is going to sleep, not when it is waking up. And just like that, a decade and a half of my own stubborn spring planting made sense. It was like someone had turned on a light in a room I had been fumbling around in for years. What she told me that day was not new information. It is older than almost everything else in agriculture. The people who lived in the mountains of Central Asia, where garlic originally comes from, did not plant it in the spring. They planted it in the autumn before the ground froze, because that is what the plant itself demanded. These were people living in some of the harshest climates on Earth, with short summers and brutal winters, and they knew exactly when to put their garlic in the ground. The Romans carried garlic with them across Europe, and they planted it in the autumn too. They fed it to their soldiers and their laborers, and they understood that a garlic crop started in the fall would be ready earlier and grow larger than anything planted in the spring. The Egyptians, who fed it to their laborers building the pyramids, knew the same thing. They recorded garlic on their walls in their medical texts in their daily life, and they planted it when the Nile flood receded and the soil was cool and ready. Every peasant farmer in every cold climate for thousands of years understood this without needing a single book. Plant garlic when the leaves are falling, not when they are returning. It is written into the rhythm of the seasons themselves. And somewhere along the way, in the last 100 years or so, we forgot. We forgot because it is not convenient. It is not convenient for the garden center, which wants to sell you seed garlic in April when you are already there buying tomato plants and cucumber starts and a new pair of gloves. It is not convenient for the seed catalog, which wants to ship everything at once in the spring, one box, one shipping charge, one moment of excitement. It is not convenient for the beginner, who wants to plant everything in one glorious weekend in May, when the soil is warm and the sun is high and the whole project feels possible. And so the knowledge quietly faded, not because it stopped working, but because it did not fit the modern calendar. That is the hidden truth right there. The answer was never lost. It was just buried under a pile of spring catalogs. Let us talk about why spring garlic fails, because I need you to understand this before I show you what autumn planting actually does. A garlic plant is not like a tomato. It is not like a pepper. It is not like a zucchini that you can start in June and still get a harvest by August. Garlic is a biennial in its natural state, even though we treat it like an annual. It has an internal clock that is set by temperature and day length. When you plant a clove in the spring, the first thing it wants to do is grow leaves. That is all it does. It grows green tops and it photosynthesizes, and it looks perfectly happy above ground. You walk past it every day and think, well, it is growing, so it must be fine. But below ground, the bulb is waiting for a signal. The signal it is waiting for is a period of cold. The plant needs a certain number of hours below about 40 degrees Fahrenheit before it will even think about forming a bulb. Without that cold period known as vernalization, the plant just keeps growing leaves. It never divides. It never forms those fat individual cloves. It just sits there like a green onion, and eventually the summer heat tells it to give up. The result is a small, single bulb, or a bulb with only a few skinny cloves, or sometimes no bulb at all, just a thick stem and a tangle of roots. You dig it up, and you are not even sure what you are looking at. It looks like a garlic that never got around to becoming garlic. When you plant in the spring, you are fighting against the plant's entire biology. You are giving it a few short weeks of cool soil if you are lucky, and then the heat arrives and the leaves accelerate, and there is no time for the bulb to develop. The plant is confused. It is trying to do everything at once, grow leaves, form a bulb, set escape, all in a compressed window of maybe 3 months. And then you wonder why your garlic is small. You wonder why the cloves are hard to peel. You wonder why the flavor is weak. You wonder why the bulbs do not store well and start to sprout in the pantry by October. The plant never had a chance. It is like asking a child to grow up in 6 weeks. Technically, it will get older, but it will not be the same as a child who had a full childhood. That is the best metaphor I can give you. Spring garlic is a rushed childhood. Autumn garlic is a full, natural life. It is the difference between a teenager who was pushed through school in half the time and one who was allowed to learn at the proper pace. One of them comes out the other side complete. The other one comes out missing something essential. Now, before I reveal the exact method, I want to address the usual fixes that people try when their spring garlic disappoints them. Because I tried all of them, and I want you to learn from my failures instead of your own. The first fix is fertilizer. People assume the garlic is small because it is hungry, so they dump nitrogen on it, blood meal, fish emulsion, compost tea, whatever they have. And the garlic does respond. It grows huge green tops, lush and beautiful like a tropical plant. You walk out to the garden and you think, this is it, this is the year. The tops are so green, so tall, so vigorous. And then you dig it up and the bulb is still small because all that nitrogen went into leaf growth, not bulb formation. You have just grown a very expensive green onion. The second fix is water. People think the bulbs are small because the soil was too dry, so they water more and more and more. They stand out there with the hose every evening, soaking the bed until it is muddy. Garlic hates sitting in wet soil. It rots, the bulbs split, the wrappers stain, and the whole thing turns into a mushy mess in storage. You have not solved the problem, you have created a new one. It is like curing a headache by cutting off your head. Technically, the headache is gone, but so is everything else. The third fix is blaming the variety. You think, well, I bought cheap garlic from the supermarket, that is why it failed. So you spend money on fancy seed garlic from a specialty catalog, some rare variety with a French name, something that sounds like it should be served in a Michelin star restaurant, and you plant it in the spring and guess what? It still fails. Because the variety was never the problem. The timing was the problem. You could plant the most expensive, most rare, most prestigious garlic on earth in the spring, and it would still be smaller than a cheap hardneck planted in October. The fourth fix is the most tragic one. People give up. They decide they cannot grow garlic, that they do not have the touch, that their climate is wrong, their soil is wrong, their luck is wrong. They tell themselves they are just not garlic people. And they go back to buying garlic at the store, those sad little bulbs from China with the roots shaved off, wrapped in plastic mesh, shipped halfway around the world, and they never know that they were one autumn away from growing the best garlic of their lives. That is the thing that gets me every time. The solution is not expensive. It is not complicated. It is just a date on the calendar. So here is what Mrs. Kowalska revealed to me, and what I have now proven in my own garden for years. The secret is simply this. Plant your garlic in the autumns, not in the spring, not in the summer. In the autumn, 4 to 6 weeks before the ground freezes solid. That is the whole secret. That is the entire mystery. It is so simple it almost feels like cheating, but hand on heart, it changes everything. When you plant a garlic clove in October or November, depending on where you live, you are giving the plant exactly what it evolved to expect. The clove goes into the cool soil and immediately begins to grow roots. Not leaves, not shoots, just roots. It spends the entire autumn establishing a deep, healthy root system before the ground freezes. Then winter arrives and the plant goes dormant. It sleeps under the snow or under the frost, with its roots already anchored deep in the earth. The cold does its work. The vernalization happens naturally over weeks and months without you doing anything at all. The plant is counting the cold hours, building the internal signal it needs to form a bulb. And then spring arrives and the garlic already has roots. It is not starting from zero. It is starting from a foundation. The leaves emerge early, sometimes through the last snow, and the plant has a full, long-growing season ahead of it. It has time. It has the cold signal it needed. It has roots that are already deep and established. And when the days lengthen in late spring, the plant shifts its energy from leaves to bulb, exactly as it was designed to do. The result is a bulb that is bigger, denser, easier to peel, and far more flavorful than anything you have ever grown in the spring. It is not a trick. It is biology respected at last. It is the difference between working with the plant and working against it. Let me give you the exact recipe because I want you to succeed the first time. You will need seed garlic. Do not use supermarket garlic. I know it is cheap, and I know it is tempting, and I know it is sitting right there on the counter while you are reading this. But most supermarket garlic is treated with growth inhibitors to prevent it from sprouting on the shelf, and it is often a softneck variety from a warm climate that will not thrive in a cold winter. It is also a gamble. You do not know what variety it is, what diseases it might carry, or how it was stored before it reached you. Instead, buy seed garlic from a local farm, a farmer's market, or a reputable seed supplier. Look for bulbs that are firm, plump, and free of mold or soft spots. Squeeze them gently. They should feel dense and solid, not spongy. The variety matters less than the timing, but if you have a choice, hardneck varieties like Music, German White, or Rocambole types tend to produce the largest, most flavorful cloves in cold climates. Softneck varieties like California Early or Enchilium Red are better for mild climates and for braiding, but they are not as cold hardy. For most home gardeners in the US, a hardneck is the safest bet. A single pound of seed garlic will cost you between $12 and $18, and it will yield roughly 40 to 50 plants. That is less than a single coffee from a vending machine per plant, and each plant will give you a whole bulb. Do the math. It is absurdly cheap. You will spend more on the gas to drive to the garden center than you will on the garlic that will feed you for a year. You will also need a well-drained garden bed in full sun. Garlic does not like wet feet. It will not forgive you for planting it in a low spot where water collects. If your soil is heavy clay, work in some compost or build a slightly raised bed. The soil does not need to be rich. Garlic is not a heavy feeder. Too much nitrogen will actually hurt you, producing huge tops and small bulbs. A balanced, moderately fertile soil is perfect. If you have grown beans or peas in the bed the year before, that is ideal. They fix nitrogen in the soil, and the garlic will appreciate it. You will need a trowel or a dibber, something to make holes. A stick works. Your finger works if the soil is loose enough. And you will need mulch. Straw, shredded leaves, or grass clippings all work. That is the entire list. Seed garlic, a sunny bed, a trowel, and mulch. No special tools, no fertilizers, no raised beds made of cedar, no drip irrigation, no hoops, no row covers. Just the basics. Just the things your great-grandparents would have had in their shed. Here is the step-by-step method, and I want you to follow it exactly the first time. About 4 to 6 weeks before your first hard frost, prepare your bed. In my zone, which is a solid zone 6, that means mid to late October. The leaves are falling, the mornings are crisp, and the garden is mostly done for the year. In warmer zones, you can plant as late as November or even December. In colder zones, you might need to plant in September. The goal is to get the cloves in the ground early enough to establish roots, but late enough that they do not send up green shoots before winter. A little shoot is fine, but you do not want a full leafy plant above ground when the hard freeze arrives. If you are not sure, ask an old gardener in your area, or check the average first frost date for your zip code and count back about 4 weeks. That is your planting window. Mark it on your calendar now, because once the cold weather arrives, it is easy to forget. First, separate the bulb into individual cloves. Do this gently and leave the papery skin on each clove. The skin is the clove's protection against rot and disease. It is not just wrapping. It is armor. Do not peel the cloves. Do not soak them in anything. Do not dust them with anything. Just separate them and set them aside. Choose the largest, fattest cloves for planting. The small ones will grow, but they will produce smaller bulbs. Save the small ones for the kitchen. The big cloves are the ones that will give you big bulbs. It is that simple. Second, make holes in your soil about 2 to 3 inches deep, spaced 6 inches apart in rows 12 inches apart. The holes should be deep enough that the clove will sit with its flat bottom down and its pointy tip up, covered by about 1 to 2 inches of soil. Do not plant too shallow. Shallow planting leads to frost heave in winter, where the freeze-thaw cycle pushes the cloves right out of the ground. You will go out in February and find your garlic sitting on top of the soil, exposed and dead. Do not plant too deep either, or the shoot will exhaust itself trying to reach the surface in spring. 2 to 3 inches is the sweet spot. It is the Goldilocks zone. Third, place 1 clove in each hole, pointy end up, flat end down. This is not optional. The pointy end is where the shoot emerges. If you plant it upside down, the shoot will have to curl around and waste energy finding the surface, and the bulb will be misshapen. Pointy end up. Always. I have made this mistake, and the garlic that came up looked like it had been through a windstorm. Fourth, cover the cloves with soil and pat it down gently. Do not pack the soil hard. Just firm it enough to make good contact. You want the soil to hug the clove, not crush it. Fifth, water the beds thoroughly. This is the last real watering you will do until spring. The water settles the soil around the cloves and signals them to start growing roots. It is the starting gun. Sixth, and this is the step most people skip, mulch the bed with 4 to 6 inches of straw, shredded leaves, or grass clippings. The mulch insulates the soil, keeping it from freezing and thawing repeatedly, which prevents frost heave. It also keeps weeds down in the spring and retains moisture. Do not skip the mulch. It is not decorative. It is functional. It is the garlic's winter blanket. Think of it as tucking your garlic into bed for the winter. After that, you do nothing. You literally do nothing for months. The garlic does not need you. The rain will fall, the snow will fall, the ground will freeze, and the garlic will sleep. This is the hardest part for most gardeners, the doing nothing part. We are conditioned to fuss, to check, to water, to feed. We want to be involved. We want to help. Resist the urge. The garlic is fine. It is doing exactly what it needs to do. It is not lonely. It is not hungry. It is dormant, which is a fancy word for resting. Leave it alone. In the spring, when the snow melts and the soil warms, the green shoots will emerge through the mulch. They will be the first green thing in your garden, and it will feel like a miracle. At that point, you can pull the mulch back a little to let the soil warm faster, but leave it around the plants to suppress weeds. Water only if the spring is unusually dry. Garlic needs about an inch of water per week during active growth, but in most springs, the natural rainfall is enough. If you are not sure, stick your finger in the soil. If it is dry, an inch down, water. If it is damp, do not. In late spring or early summer, depending on the variety, hardneck garlic will send up a curly flower stalk called a scape. Cut it off. Do not let it flower. The scape takes energy away from the bulb. Cut it when it has made one full curl and use it in the kitchen. Scapes are a delicacy, garlicky and mild, perfect for pesto or stir-fry. They are the bonus harvest, the appetizer before the main course. Harvest the bulbs in mid to late summer, when the bottom 3 or 4 leaves have turned brown but the top leaves are still green. Dig them gently with a fork. Do not pull them by the stems and cure them in a cool, dry, shaded place for 2 to 3 weeks. Then trim the roots and the stems and store them in a cool, dry spot. They will keep for 6 to 8 months. You will have garlic all winters. You will have garlic to give away. You will have garlic so good that your neighbors will start asking you what your secret is. Now let me explain why this works, because I want you to understand it, not just follow it. The key is something called vernalization. It is a fancy word for a very simple idea. Certain plants need a period of cold before they will flower or form bulbs. Garlic is one of them. The cold does something at the cellular level. It triggers a hormonal change that tells the plant to stop growing leaves and start dividing into cloves. Without that cold trigger, the plant stays in a juvenile state, growing green and never maturing. It is the same reason some apple trees will not bloom if they do not get enough winter chill. It is the same reason tulip bulbs need a cold period before they will flower. It is the same reason a peach tree in Florida will struggle while a peach tree in Georgia thrives. The cold is not a hardship for the plant. It is a signal. It is the starting gun. When you plant garlic in the autumn, you are letting the plant experience that signal naturally over a long period, just as it would in the wild. When you plant in the spring, you are denying it the signal or giving it only a brief, weak version of it, and the plant responds by staying immature. It is not that you are a bad gardener. It is that you have been asking the plant to skip a step it cannot skip. You have been asking it to run a race without hearing the starting gun. There is another factor, and it is just as important. Roots. When you plant in the autumn, the clove spends the entire fall growing roots. By the time the ground freezes, it has a root system that is 6 to 10 inches deep, sometimes more. That root system survives the winter dormant but alive, and when spring arrives, it is already in place. The plant does not have to grow roots from scratch. It can put all its energy into leaves and then into bulbs. A spring-planted garlic clove has to grow roots and leaves at the same time, in a race against the summer heat. It is like trying to build the foundation of a house while also building the walls and the roof. An autumn-planted clove has already won the root race before the leaves even appear. That is why autumn garlic is bigger. It is not magic. It is a head start. It is the difference between starting a marathon at the starting line and starting it 3 miles in. The autumn garlic is already 3 miles down the road before the spring garlic even ties its shoes. And then there is the day length factor. Garlic begins to form bulbs when the days reach a certain length, usually around 14 to 16 hours of daylight, which in most of the US happens in late May or early June. An autumn-planted garlic plant has had months to grow roots and leaves before that day length arrives. It is a large, mature plant by then, fully capable of channeling all that solar energy into a big bulb. A spring-planted garlic plant is still small when the long days arrive. It has not had time to grow enough leaves to support a big bulb. The long days come, the signal goes out, and the plant forms a bulb, but it is a small bulb because the plant itself is small. It is not a mystery. It is just math. More leaves at the moment of bulb formation equals more energy captured equals a bigger bulb. Autumn planting gives you more leaves at that critical moment. Spring planting gives you fewer. That is the entire equation. It is not complicated. It is just the way the plant works. Let me share my first results, because I want you to know this is not theoretical. The first autumn I planted garlic, I put in about 40 cloves, a mix of two hardneck varieties I had bought from a local farmer. I planted them in late October, mulched them with straw, and then basically forgot about them. I did not water them all winters. I did not check on them. I did not even think about them until the snow started to melt, and I saw the first green tips poking through. In the spring, they came up through the straw looking like little green spears, and I was honestly kind of surprised. I had half expected them to rot or freeze or simply not come up at all. But they came up, every single one of them, and they grew. By June, the stalks were as thick as my thumb, and the scapes were curling beautifully. I cut the scapes, made pesto, and waited. In late July, I dug the first bulb. It was the size of a baseball. Not a golf ball, not a ping-pong ball, a baseball. I weighed it. Just over 4 ounces. The bulbs I had grown in the spring, in the same bed with the same soil, had averaged about 1.5 ounces. The autumn bulbs were nearly 3 times the size. And the flavor, I cannot even describe the flavor. It was hotter, richer, more complex. It was the garlic I remembered from my grandmother's kitchen, the garlic that made your fingers smell for a day, the garlic that you could smell from across the room. I stood there in the garden holding that bulb and I laughed out loud. 15 years. 15 years of spring garlic, and the answer had been sitting in my neighbor's garden the whole time. Now a word about what can go wrong, because I want you to be prepared. The most common mistake is planting too early. If you plant garlic in early September or even late August, the clove may send up a tall green shoot before winter, and that shoot will be killed by the frost. The clove itself will probably survive, but it will be weakened and the bulb will be smaller. The goal is root growth only before winter. A small green tip, an inch or two, is fine. A full leafy plant is not. The second most common mistake is planting too shallow. If the clove is only half an inch below the surface, the freeze-thaw cycles of winter will push it right out of the ground. You will find cloves sitting on top of the soil in February, shriveled and dead. 2 to 3 inches deep is the rule. The third mistake is forgetting the mulch. Without mulch, the soil temperature fluctuates wildly, and the cloves can be damaged. The mulch is not optional. It is the difference between a cozy winter and a brutal one. The fourth mistake is using supermarket garlic. I know I said this before, but I am saying it again because it is that important. Supermarket garlic is often treated with a chemical that prevents sprouting. It is also often a softneck variety from California or China, not suited to cold climates. It may grow, but it will not thrive. Spend the $12 on real seed garlic. It is the best money you will spend all year. And the fifth mistake, the one nobody talks about, is harvesting too late. If you leave the bulbs in the ground too long, the wrappers start to break down, the cloves start to separate, and the garlic will not store well. Harvest when the bottom 3 or 4 leaves are brown, not when the whole plant is dead. If you wait until the whole plant is brown and fallen over, you have waited too long. The garlic will still taste fine, but it will not keep. It will sprout in your pantry by November, and you will be back at the store buying more garlic, which defeats the entire purpose. Let me also address the question of hardneck versus softneck, because it confuses a lot of people. Hardneck garlic, as the name suggests, produces a hard central stalk, and it sends up scapes in the spring. It is more cold hardy, more flavorful, and easier to peel, but it does not store as long, usually 4 to 6 months. Softneck garlic has a soft, flexible stem, no scapes, and it stores longer, up to 8 or 9 months. It is the kind you usually see braided in the grocery store. For cold climates, hardneck is the clear winner. For mild climates, both work, but softneck is often preferred for its storage life. If you are in zone 6 or colder, plant hardneck. If you are in zone 7 or warmer, you can plant either, but hardneck will still produce larger, more flavorful bulbs. If you want the biggest, most impressive garlic, plant a hardneck variety like Music, which is known for producing enormous bulbs with a rich, complex flavor. If you want garlic that will store until the next summer, plant a softneck like Enchilium Red. Or plant both. Plant both and see which one you prefer. That is the beauty of garlic. It is not a competition. It is an experiment, and you are the scientist. The garden is your laboratory, and the only person you have to impress is yourself. Now I want to tell you something that still amazes me, even after all these years. The garlic you plant in October will be the first thing to emerge in your garden in the spring. Not the crocuses, not the daffodils, not the early peas. The garlic. It will come up through the last snow green and alive, while everything else is still dormant. And there is something profoundly hopeful about that. In the darkest, coldest part of the year, something is already growing. Something you planted with your own hands is already working, already alive, already preparing for the spring. It is a reminder that the garden does not start in May. It starts in October. It starts when you are willing to do the work that no one sees, the work that happens underground, the work that does not produce immediate results. That is the lesson of autumn garlic, and it is a lesson that applies to far more than gardening. The most important work is often the work that happens in the dark, in the cold, in the quiet, when no one is watching and no one is applauding. The roots grow first. The leaves come later. And if you skip the roots, if you rush to the leaves, you will never get the bulb. I want to close with a simple invitation. If you have never grown garlic, or if you have tried and failed, or if you have been growing small, disappointing spring garlic for years, I want you to try one thing. Just one thing. This autumn, buy a pound of seed garlic. Not a lot, just a pound. Plant it in a sunny corner of your yard, or even in a large pot on your patio, 4 to 6 weeks before the ground freezes. Mulch it, forget it, and then wait. Wait through the winter, wait through the snow, wait until the grain shoots appear in the spring. And then in July, dig up one bulb. Just one. Hold it in your hand. Look at the size of it. Smell it, taste it, and then come back and tell me that autumn planting does not matter. I dare you. Because once you have grown garlic the right way, the old way, the way people have grown it for thousands of years, you will never go back. You will never look at a spring garden the same way again. You will understand in your bones that the calendar is not a suggestion. It is a map, and the people who came before us knew how to read it. We just forgot. Thank you for listening. If this helped you, if it changed the way you think about garlic, or about gardening, or about the quiet work of autumn, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is still planting in the spring and wondering why the bulbs are small. Someone who has given up on growing their own food. Someone who needs a reminder that the best things in life are not fast, not easy, and not for sale. The old knowledge is still here. It is buried in the soil, waiting for us to remember. Now go plant some garlic.